Hello, I'm Bob Baker with the Schiller Institute. You are now going to hear from 8 American farm leaders and fishery leaders about the terrible conditions food producers face. They speak here for the purpose of identifying the productive principles of production we must have for a new system, one that will guarantee food and a future for everyone in the world. We have a world food emergency. The millions of people now suffering extreme hunger will turn into 1 or 2 billion at the starvation point. World grain stocks and output are going down. This must stop. It's a question of culture, of science, and statecraft. We're all in this. The Schiller Institute started a Food for Peace initiative in 1988 in Chicago to prevent what we now see unfolding. Today, let us all join in together and renew what it takes for food for peace. The farm leaders you're going to hear are from 5 states, from the Midwest, from California, and from Alaska. We will begin with Colorado and Kansas. Thank you.
This is Mike Calacrate. I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I have a food company here and also a livestock producing operation in St. Francis, Kansas, which is right on the border. So basically, we've built a model of the food system that I think works going forward. I want to thank Helga LaRouche and the Schiller Institute for the opportunity to present today on this issue of sort of this global monopoly financialization of everything, and especially including the financialization of our food system. And I agree, there can be no peace unless we can get justice, and there can also be no peace unless we can get food, adequate food to the world's hungry people. And I see the financialization, I see the global financial monopolies just totally destroying any hope of getting the job done, of actually feeding the world's hungry. And it reminds me a little bit about how I learned how important food is and how important the wealth that's created from the production of food is to our global economy. And I was at my 10th year class reunion in Evergreen, Colorado, and Tina Owen's mother said, "Mike, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I farm and ranch." And she says, "Oh, wow, you're a wealth creator." And I had never really thought about it that way. And she said, "Yeah, when I was a young girl," she says, "my grandfather explained how farmers and ranchers create wealth. And he also said, but the problem is that everyone else does the laundry and they're making more than they should." And when you see so much power in the financial sector, I basically compare it to like a tapeworm. They basically drain the wealth that's created from the land and from the people who do the work, and they put it in their own pockets and concentrate that wealth into the hands of fewer and fewer people. And as we know throughout history, the greatest threat to any free society is the concentration of power and wealth. And so I would love to see the global financial system that is extracting wealth from all wealth creators, whether they're in agriculture or whether it's mining of resources or whatever. It simply has to stop. And we've got to get them back to doing some real work again. And we've got to prioritize the interests of those wealth creators, whether they're the people who grow our food or the people who make other things, or the workers within the system that add the value to put it to put food on our plates. We've got to start to prioritize them again in building a new food system. And the new food system should be based upon family farmers and ranchers providing good stewardship, providing good husbandry to livestock, addressing climate issues through better forms of production agriculture. And I want to be able to see the governments of the world support these kinds of food systems that, once again, will create wealth and will provide good food security in all parts of the world. The world should feed itself. The United States, the biggest lie ever is that we were going to feed the world. We can't even feed ourselves today with the control of the Brazilians over our meat industry, the Chinese over our pork industry. We are in horrible shape. We cannot feed ourselves, and we are vulnerable to the meltdown of the global financial system. So I would like to see the financial system go away, not just declare bankruptcy, but just go away and localize financial systems so they serve the people instead of corporations around the world. I would like to see, going forward, no conglomerate being allowed any ownership of any essential or critical industry. A good example currently is the baby formula. Abbott is part of a government-sponsored monopoly for producing baby formula, but their baby formula business is only 5% of their business. They really don't care about it that much. The CEO probably doesn't even look at it, but look at how it has impacted this conglomerate control of food, a critical food ingredient, how it has impacted America. That has got to stop. And it's going to, of course, take a willing Congress to start enforcing some antitrust laws. We're going to have to break up the concentrated power and wealth. And in order to do that, it's going to take a new court system with judges that favor antitrust law enforcement rather than the Reagan appointees who believed government was the problem and that corporations don't need regulations. The trade should not be between Cargill and us. It should be between people that produce the food and people who eat the food. This is the food system we are building here in Colorado Springs. Another recent example is Cargill in Ukraine. Cargill is one of the biggest global predators on the planet. Cargill should not be allowed to be even involved in any of the critical industries. We simply need to break up this corporate power around the world. These are the real captains of industry. These are the real controllers of our food supply. These are like strip miners. They take it all. They take the entire resource till it's gone, and then they go somewhere else and do business. They search the world for the hungriest people that will work the cheapest to sell that production into the highest consuming markets, which has been the United States. But if you really look at our financials, we're broke, and we need to favor more wealth creation in our country, and we need to support those who actually produce the wealth that we need to survive, in particularly in the way of food.
Hello, I am Jon Baker from rural Iowa. I am a fourth generation cattle producer and a community banker. I would like to thank Helga LaRouche and the Schiller Institute for the opportunity to talk with you guys today. I am going to go through a couple of points here on the conditions of agriculture and the conditions of rural America. We are at a breaking point here in rural America. Our family farmers are to the point where they are either retiring or forced to grow to a size that extends a comfortable financial situation. The diversity that the family farm had at one point and offered as a safety net does not exist anymore. A lot of young producers are entering into custom growing contracts with large vertical integrators for livestock, mainly pork and poultry, as their source of diversification. I believe we got to this point in the last 30 to 40 years with the basis of cheap food. The farm programs were designed for cheap food and favored large corporate processors, and a subsidy program for the producer's loss instead of a parity price program to keep the producer above cost of production. This allowed large multinational processors to buy products, mainly grain, at or below cost of production. That has driven a large majority of the family farmers off the land or out of production. I believe the best way that we can counteract the last 30 to 40 years of that policy is to go back to the economic policies that our country was based on and founded on, using LaRouche's 4 laws as the main driver. Production, physical production, and infrastructure is the key.
I'm Wilbur Curley, here with my son Ken and grandson Kyle. My grandparents and my parents went through the Great Depression back in the 20s and 30s. I've been in agriculture my whole life of about 84 years. Have seen really a lot of things come and go. And the sad part of it, I've seen the downfall of the independent producer. Wall Street and the mega systems are kind of controlling our production, and they are not more efficient. They just control the value of the products, and that is leading to the demise of the independent producers. Back in 1920s, there was an act, the Packers and Stockyards Act was put into law, and it was used and broke up the railroads and the packer domination in our system. That act is still there. We do not have politicians with enough intestinal fortitude to enforce it. So the independent producers and the consumers both are being really taken advantage of at this point in our production system. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We've got to overhaul the banking system, put back in the Glass-Steagall Act, return fair market value for ag products, put culture back into agriculture. It's more than just agribusiness.
Hi, my name is Ken Kehrli, and I'm a independent pork producer from Northeast Iowa. I've been a full-time pork producer since 1985, and I've watched our industry consolidate from what was an independent, smaller farm model to much larger numbers now. It's a very efficient system in volume when everything works. With the past problems, packing house, employee positivities for COVID, plant shutdowns, these kinds of things, it disrupted our industry greatly. We're now looking at the threat of, a foreign animal disease and those shutdowns. And basically that's terrible for the people that care for the animals and for the animals. Again, a very efficient system. We can produce pork in the US as cheaply as anyone in the world and as efficiently, and it's a great protein product. The problem is when the system is disrupted, the problems just multiply. And so as we look at this, the only solution that I can come up with, particularly now with food security as such an issue worldwide, is local systems. So, and that includes humane harvest, packaging, processing, cutting to, local consumer specs, and that whole system being recreated that can serve individual families, restaurants, food service, groceries. We've actually got, in some instances, meat cases in Iowa that are short of meat products. And it looks to me like adding that component at least to our production system here would be a great benefit. Currently in the US, 1 out of every 5 pigs needs to be exported. And when containers aren't available, or there's geopolitical issues that shut down that flow of pigs, further consolidation in our industry occurs because it puts more independent producers out of business. And again, we're in the middle of the breadbasket of the United States in Iowa, and you've got the average consumer worried about food security. So again, maybe local production, local systems is a positive moving forward.
I'm Kyle Kehrli. I live here in Northeast Iowa with Wilbur and Ken. I'm the 5th generation of our family to farm here in the US, and I've got 2 little girls, 4 and 6. So they'll be the 6th generation, hopefully. I worked in town for 7 years prior to coming home, and I've been home farming full-time for 4 years now. So when I graduated in 2005, farm ground was bringing about $5,000 an acre. And then today here in 2022, that number is about $18,000 to $20,000 an acre. So we've seen some rapid inflation just over a short time period. Makes it very difficult for young producers to try to come back and start from scratch. You need this generational support in order to make a go in ag. And that's, we're seeing this loss of generational knowledge as these younger guys are struggling to come back and try to get into the game. Another issue that we have when we try to go to the sale barn or buying stations, if we can find them, they've also gone by the wayside as these larger corporations take over control of the supply of animals coming into the system. But as we try to go into those sale barns and buying stations, there's fewer and fewer buyers at those events. And so it's difficult to have a competitive price for your product, which in the case of a beef animal, you're looking at 16 months from birth to harvest. It represents a lot of time, effort, and energy and money. And that can all go by the wayside in 20 seconds in the sale ring. We don't have enough competition in there to get a fair price for the product that we're producing.
We want to thank the LaRoche organization for the opportunity to participate. I think keeping the family in our structure today is critical. And I think maybe we should be reminded of the David and Goliath story from the Bible. Picture yourself as David, and I think we need to picture our government and our corporations as Goliath. And with that in mind, full speed ahead.
My name is Frank Andrus, and my sons and I are farming here in the Sacramento Valley of California, and we are struggling to survive the worst drought that we've had here in 127 years. And so that's what we're doing here. Okay, I could have mentioned also the re-looking by many people now at the Nawapa project because of the drought in the whole western part of the United States is causing people now to look at another source of water, because our traditional sources here in California, the Shasta Lake project and also the Colorado River project is those reservoirs at dangerously low positions right now, and it's causing some farmers, like in the Imperial Valley, I know that they're dependent solely on the Colorado River for irrigating their crops there. Being a desert area, they are totally dependent on that water there to produce their crops. Well, I wanted to thank Helga LaRouche and also the Schiller Institute for making this available to be transcribed all over the world, other farm people and consumers as well, because we're on the verge of food security all over the world, because farmers have been producing food for less than 30% of parity. This has caused a real severe crisis in our food production and our food security now. So we're glad to see, and I salute the farmers in other countries for the efforts that they're making over there, especially the farmers who just had some very good success in India by having some stability put into their crop prices over there. So I'm grateful for the opportunity that the Schiller Institute has provided, and I'd like to participate in the future as well.
Hello, I'm Jim Moore. I'm a commercial fisherman in the state of Alaska, and I've been fishing for about 53 years now, and I've seen a lot of changes in this industry. There are different kinds of commercial fisheries, and my particular type is trolling, which is hook and line fishery, as opposed to trawling. It's sometimes confused with trawling, which is towing nets through the water. But I'm past president of Alaska Trollers Association. I've been involved in fisheries politics for a decade or two or three, and I have 3 children. My wife and I raised them on our boat. At least for during the season, they did get to go to school and all of that. But I guess what I'm saying is that our particular type of fishing, this trolling, is like the fishing equivalent of the small family farm. They're mostly small family operations, and the families get the opportunity to work together, and there's a lot of benefits in that. Nearly all of my 9 grandchildren are classical musicians, as well as my children too. But anyway, I'm really distressed at our world situation, and challenged by it, you might say, because being a fisherman, you're an optimist. You if you're not catching, it's because you haven't quite got it figured out yet. There's fish out there somewhere, you know. But looking at our world situation, it is very distressing. And in in fisheries politics, I guess maybe I'll take it from this angle. We're facing a lot of challenges. One of the greatest ones that I see is the politicization of science, and actually the breakdown of science by consensus, the lack of hope for a future based on this narrative that's been programmed into us for a couple of generations, that humanity is the cause of the Earth's collapse of the ecosystems and all of this kind of stuff like that. And it's basically just junk science. And I've been distressed by that because most people engaged in our industry, as in other industries, productive industries, find it's really difficult to be able to hire young people that are good workers. And a lot of it's because they have no hope. They'll hope for a beautiful future, you know, which I believe we can create. And a lot of it has been instilled to them through these horrible narratives, like your very breath is destructive to the atmosphere of the earth, and it's going to cause catastrophic climate change and all this kind of stuff. I take a lot of young people out fishing, you know, and I'm heartbroken at seeing the demoralization of an entire generation that's been fed these lines of hopelessness. And I think it can be reversed. And I think the way it's been made very clear by the principles of economy that Lyndon LaRouche has laid out. I think it's referred to sometimes as the 4 laws. You know, I wrote a letter to the president back in 2020. It was President Trump at that time. And I think I'll just read some of what I wrote then. It's absolutely essential that we invest in a great infrastructure upgrade, the actual physical economy, rather than in another bailout of the bankrupt international financial system, backfilling their gambling losses and enabling the continuance of the so-called too big to fail private banking cartels. We should have learned that by now. A casino economy based on speculation has replaced our former production-based economy since 1971, with the elimination of fixed exchange rates between nations, and especially since the repeal of Glass-Steagall in 1999. Huge amounts of capital have been diverted into short-term risky investments, which promised rapid turnover and high rates of return, gambling, rather than placed into maintaining and upgrading infrastructure, including healthcare infrastructure. The time is now to address this properly. Now, I wrote that over 2 years ago, and it's kind of strange when you think that the leadership that we have seen in this nation, in Congress, has failed to grasp the import of this and has failed to act. And this was written to the President of the United States by a fisherman. What are they doing up on the Hill in Washington, D.C.? surely they must have seen this. It's really so evident. It's really so clear. But I'm not despairing because reality is about to strike. And reality has a way of, there's a correcting. And I'm so thankful for the influence on my life and on my thinking of the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche movement, the ideas and the writings of Lyndon LaRouche, which I've followed off and on, and now mostly on for the last 30 years. And I am therefore hopeful that we can indeed have a beautiful future, but we have to act.
I'd like to thank Helga LaRouche and the Schiller Institute for the opportunity to speak today. My name is James Benham. I'm currently the state president for Indiana Farmers Union, also sit on a board for National Farmers Union. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about Glass-Steagall. About over 10 years ago, back 2013, well, 9 years ago, actually, I wrote an article that preferred that. And I'm really going to read that again because nothing really has changed in that. But I'm going to start with, I'm writing to urge you to act immediately to ensure that the 1933 Glass-Steagall Act is reinstated as a law of the land now. The industry and agriculture of our nations are in ruins. The suffering of the elderly and the poor today are intolerable. The suffering around the world has reached a famine stage in too many places. Let me speak about what I know about farming. As an active corn and soybean farmer, head of Indiana Farmers Union, National Farmers Union Board, I can tell you that the food supply of the world and this nation is in peril because we have let speculators set farm policy, as well as banking policy. Speculators determine the price of commodities at the expense of both producer and consumer. Speculators are driving farmers out of farming, and without farmers, who's going to produce the food? Pass Glass-Steagall, and we can get in the business of rebuilding the nations. We'll be able to pass farm and food supply legislation based on the principles of parity pricing for farmers and food security of Americans. The domestic production reserve, we can finance urgently needed water projects such as North American Water and Power Project in NWAPA. Now, let me recap on a couple of those things, because when we talk about Glass-Steagall, back in 2013, there was a couple of bills in Congress trying to pass that. Today, things have gotten worse because there's no such bill in Congress. They have gotten way past that to where they are actually enslaved to the banking system and speculators we have in the world today. We have a lot of people in Congress that are basically captives of this industry. And I used to talk about, still do, and have been admonished for saying this, but we have the best politicians money can buy. And that's a fact. They just go in there and to make special interest groups fund these guys and gals, and they become to the point where they're not effective for the folks in the United States. As far as parity is something that we've talked about for a long time on agriculture, that we felt like that would be a fair shake at a good return on the investment for people to continually be able to produce food. The problem with what we have today and under our current system, and with the pandemic we've had and the shortage of supplies and the demand being high as it is, and commodity values are high. Farmers are making more money today than they have ever, with the exception of one problem. The inputs that they've got have climbed that same ladder. And so therefore they continually squeeze the value of the dollar that the farmer's receiving because of the speculation and the ability to increase their prices, because farmers have to have some of these inputs to produce a crop. One of the big things that was talked about early on, that most of our potash comes from Russia. We've had a mine or two here in the United States. They've long shut them down years ago. And so without that potash, there's a concern about the ability to raise crop. There's other alternatives, but none that people want to really try to explore because it's easy and what people have been accustomed to doing. So with that, I'd like to finish up on a couple things. I am a Christian. I do feel like we're in the end times, and that some of the things we're dealing with now are because of our turning away from the God's creation and the biblical means of doing things. And I did want to make one statement today, and it's a little bit like what we had in Sunday school this morning. It was in James chapter 1, verse 26. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves. And the religious is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows and their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. There's our challenge. How do we institute this? How do we get back in those kind of reins? And the understanding of the fact that people that are in charge of these things that are now, that's causing us all these troubles, are not going to give it up easy. So I'll end with this. What are we prepared to do? Just simply, what are we prepared to do? Thank you so much. You all have a great day, and I hope this has been a worthwhile message. Thank you.